Landing on my heart. Chapter 11. Louis Fu has never been in the habit of flipping through his circle of friends, and the mobile phone is a communication tool for him rather than a social tool. But tonight, he was lying in bed, ready to sleep, and suddenly he was in a mood and clicked into the circle of friends. The first is Cecile Ruan's. There was nothing nutritious, and Louis Fu crossed it out. After 2 or 3 seconds, he pauses and pulls the page back down. Dog. The property of this apartment is the best in the country, and there is no way for wild dogs to come in. No matter how he looked, he felt that Cecile Ruan was scolding him in secret. People sometimes give themselves hints, and they are particularly prone to falling into it. Louis Fu's heart suddenly felt hot, and a breath that could not go up and down hung in his chest. Walking to the window and opening the curtains, it was already raining lightly outside. Louis Fu turned and picked up his cell phone and called his assistant. "Tomorrow morning, I will call up all my travel records for the year." After a pause, he said, 2 years. A circle of friends sent out. There were many likes and comments, and some people came to care about whether Cecile Ruan did not live in a good environment. At this time, Cecile Ruan was a little embarrassed. She knew that she would only send it to Louis Fu alone, and now she had to respond to her friend's concern. And Louis Fu, who seems to be in a good mood, gave her a comment, "Is it? You will point it out to me another day." Xiaozhen came out of the bath, changed Cecile Ruan to wash. Before putting down the phone, Cecile Ruan replied, "Okay, Shy, also pointed out to you. So I'll point you to the mirror, will you see?" After coming out of the shower, I saw Louis Fu give her a reply, "What about tomorrow morning?" Groove, is this dog man dating me? Cecile Ruan didn't reply, threw away her phone like a hot potato, jumped on the bed and got under the covers. Xiaozhen didn't want to sleep because she wouldn't go to work during the day tomorrow. Ruan, I still have palpitations, I'm really useless, I panic when I encounter things, unlike you who are always very calm, if only we were even. After saying that, no one responded, and when he looked over, Cecile Ruan was breathing long and had fallen asleep. Xiaozhen tugged the quilt for Cecile Ruan and fell asleep on her shoulder. Cecile Ruan slept restlessly that night. "I had some dreams scattered, and then somehow I dreamed of a dog, not a vicious dog, and Teddy with well-built hair, but when she barked at her, she softened her legs. Even if it is scary, the owner who leads this dog is Louis Fu. Cecile Ruan is genuinely afraid of dogs. When I was a child, I went to play in the countryside, and the pastoral dogs were all free-range, although most of them were very well-behaved, but there was always a manic one chasing her for half a street, and finally frightened her to the ground. The dog came up and bit her pants. Cecile Ruan's snot tears pasted her face, the other foot kicked over. The dog seemed to be also provoked, unceremoniously gave a bite. Fortunately, some villagers arrived in time to take the dog away, and Cecile Ruan was sent to the hospital by her parents for a shot, and she was already afraid of dogs. But whenever a dog approached, her scalp immediately became numb, and even her breathing rhythm was chaotic. When I woke up by this dog, it was just dawn. Cecile Ruan leaned on the head of the bed for a while. Xiaozhen next to her was still snoring slightly. She slowly got out of bed, walked out lightly, ran downstairs for an hour, came back to take a shower, changed clothes, ate something casually, picked up her bag and went out. She is not busy these days. She has been attending online induction training at home. Today is the weekend, but she has to go to World Airlines to meet the crew in advance for tomorrow's first flight of ACJ31. When she walked to the elevator, she deliberately glanced at the time. At 8 o'clock sharp, this community is not affordable for ordinary office workers, so there should be no one at this time. However, as soon as the elevator opened, she immediately denied what she had just thought. She felt that she had woken up early enough, but Louis Fu was even earlier, and now he was already standing in the elevator like a dog. Although she knew last night that Louis Fu lived in the same building as her, she had expected to meet in the elevator sooner or later, but she didn't expect this day to come so quickly. Fu Yuming originally lowered his head to straighten his cuffs, looked up at Cecile Ruan, seemed not surprised at all, reached out to block the elevator door, waved his head, and signaled her to come in. Cecile Ruan now remembers the Teddy in the dream as soon as he sees him, and his heart palpitations have not subsided, and he automatically stands on the other side after entering, as if he is 108,000 miles away. "Early, Mr. Fu." Louis Fu was about to answer when she heard her say, "How about getting up so early to see the dog?" After saying that, Cecile Ruan found Louis Fu looking at her, with an inexplicable smile in her deep eyes. Cecile Ruan wanted to slap herself, wondering that it must have been the lack of stamina of the dream at night that caused her to speak and wrap herself in. She snorted under her nose, put on her headphones, and stopped looking at Louis Fu. As soon as the music started, someone took off the headphones on one side. Cecile Ruan turned around. "What are you doing? Let's talk." The earphone hung on Louis Fu's fingertips, and the white thin line connected to Cecile Ruan at the other end, dangling nonchalantly. Louis Fu raised his eyes, took a step forward, and was only an arm's length away from Cecile Ruan. "I think you always have a hostility towards me. Is it my delusion?" He looked at Cecile Ruan, noticing every change in her expression. The person in front of him is still plain-faced, his hair tied behind his head is only a short ponytail, his eyes are narrow and long, and the tail of his eyes is upturned when there is a faint smile on his face. "Ah, I hate the rich." Because she had a bit of a smile on her face, it was difficult to tell if she was telling the truth or joking. Maybe it's a little more joking. But in any case, Louis Fu had no desire to continue talking. The headphones were lowered and dangled over their chests. Seeing Louis Fu's wonderful face, Cecile Ruan lowered her head and pursed her lips and smiled. But the smile didn't last for 2 seconds when it was interrupted by the scene in front of him. The elevator stopped on the 10th floor, and an old lady led a Labrador in. A flesh-white Labrador, sticking out his tongue, breathlessly, fluttering. No, Cecile Ruan felt like she couldn't breathe. She turned pale and retreated to the corner of the elevator, clutching the hem of her clothes. Although the owner pulled the leash, the dog seemed to be overactive, trying to press Cecile Ruan, and was grabbed by the owner every time he almost pounced. But even so, Cecile Ruan was stiff and unable to move, and fine sweat soon broke out on his forehead. Every second in the elevator is stretched indefinitely. Cecile Ruan clenched her teeth and felt her back cold when Louis Fu suddenly stepped in front of her. With his hands in his pockets, he looked up at the reflection on the elevator door, his expression calm, as if he had just moved a position without purpose. Everything in front of me was suddenly tightly blocked, and the tip of my nose smelled the faint fur fragrance. Cecile Ruan's body slowly relaxed and slowly raised her eyes. She found that Louis Fu was really tall, half a head taller than 1.7 meters, and her shoulders were also wide, which held the suit perfectly. Louis Fu stood in front and the dog easily pounced on his leg. 2 paw prints are left on the black pants. He is the kind of person who reveals only nobility from top to bottom. These 2 paw prints are especially abrupt, and the dog owner also drums in his heart, pulling the dog in front of him and tightening the rope. Half a minute later, the elevator reached the 1st floor, and the dog owner hurriedly said sorry and led the dog out. Louis Fu didn't react and glanced back at Cecile Ruan. Death voyage. Finally, there was no smell of dogs in the air, and Cecile Ruan breathed a long sigh of relief and nodded. Louis Fu walked out in 2 steps, followed by Cecile Ruan. "Are you really afraid of dogs?" Cecile Ruan whispered. "I was bitten as a child." Louis Fu slowed down and hooked the corners of his lips. Cecile Ruan didn't see his smile and focused on his pants. She paused, took a tissue out of her bag and handed it to Louis Fu. Louis Fu took the tissue, bent down to wipe his pants, and asked when he got up, "By the way." A gentle wind blowing between the two of them in the hall, the sudden rain first stopped, the air was still wet, this wind mixed with the fresh smell of the grass. Cecile Ruan nodded, "Thank you." Bai Yang stepped back and forth along the green lawn with his head bowed, as if looking for something. The apartment is very quiet, occasionally old people come out for a walk. There are not many young people commuting at this point, but there are many people who come out for morning jogging. Bai Yang turned his head and saw Louis Fu and Cecile Ruan approaching, and although there was surprise in his eyes, he immediately walked out and stood respectfully. "What are you doing?" Louis Fu asked. "Oh, looking for a dog." Bai Tianyang said, "Didn't Miss Ruan say that there were wild dogs here last night? Just now I did see a dark shadow rushing into the grass to see if there were really wild dogs, and if so, then I had to mention it to the property." Louis Fu's face sank subtly, while Cecile Ruan looked up at the scenery. Bai Yang turned to Cecile Ruan again. "Miss Ruan, where did you see the wild dog last night? Is it dirty or not?" Cecile Ruan's face did not change color, and he pointed ahead, "Over there, it may have been captured." Louis Fu glanced at her and said in a deep voice, "Get in the car." The driver had already parked his car and waited. The atmosphere inside the car is still delicate. Louis Fu and Cecile Ruan sat in the back row, neither of them spoke, and Bai Yang naturally felt this strange atmosphere and did not dare to ask anything, until he flipped through his iPad and remembered something. By the way, Mr. Fu, Mr. Qin sent someone to the office yesterday afternoon, and you will attend the wedding on the 7th of next month. Mr. Qin. It is the son of Chairman Hengshi Steel, Qin Jiamu. Louis Fu closed his eyes and thought for a moment, is that the one that was spilled coffee by a flight attendant in our company that year? Bai Yang nodded, they're getting married. That person, Cecile Ruan also remembered, she had also taken a few shifts with the flight attendant before, a gentle and cute girl, with 2 pair swirls on her face when she smiled, and she was very impressed. I'm actually going to get married. She must be 26 years old this year. Cecile Ruan was reminiscing when Louis Fu next to him suddenly said, good means. Cecile Ruan looked sideways, his eyes still closed, and the corners of his mouth were a wistful mockery. Not again, the memories of 3 years ago swept back, this laugh, this tone. Cecile Ruan's chest suddenly rose. What a shame on this person. What a good means, exactly the same as when he said you might as well dream. There was nothing to chat about this in the morning, and Bai Yang was also a little interested, because Qing Dong doesn't seem to be very satisfied, so the wedding didn't go through his consent, then your side. Not going. Louis Fu said, he doesn't have to give face, you refused for me. Bai Yang said yes, turned back, saw a bottle of mineral water in hand, and casually handed it to Cecile Ruan. Miss Ruan, do you want to drink water? La Quinn Andes mineral water, glass bottle, tin lid. Cecile Ruan didn't really want to take it, and Bai Yang said again, oh, this is not easy to open, you wait a minute, I'll do it. Louis Fu took the water bottle from his hand and was about to twist it when Cecile Ruan took it. I'll do it myself. Louis Fu saw her staring at her eyes, clear and bright, and with an indescribable energy. Just as he was about to ponder this look, there was a soft bang in his ear. Cecile Ruan held the bottle in one hand and looked directly at Louis Fu, but with a thumb rub, the bottle cap opened. Oh, Bai Yang couldn't help but let out a shallow exclamation, this strength. Seeing this, Louis Fu smiled, it is worthy of being a woman who can give people to heaven. Cecile Ruan tugged at the corners of his mouth, I can also send people into the soil. The atmosphere inside the car suddenly froze. Landing on my heart. Chapter 12. Bai Yang felt as if the air in the car was empty, and it lasted for 3 minutes. When he felt that he had difficulty breathing, someone opened the window in time to breathe. Bai Yang thought that Miss Ruan was also a person with too long a reflex arc, and now he reacted that he had just spoken inappropriately, so he opened the window to divert attention. However, when he looked in the rearview mirror, it was his boss who opened the window. It was on the viaduct leading to World Airlines, near the airport, away from the city, and the car was fast, and the wind outside was whizzing in, passing through Louis Fu and straight towards Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan immediately reached out and covered his forehead. She tied her hair when she went out today, and her bangs blew messily on her sideburns, and she was supposed to parachute for a while. Fortunately, before she could speak, Louis Fu closed the window herself. This brief operation, Cecile Ruan interprets, means that Louis Fu has just defused himself. That's good, she's happy. Cecile Ruan straightened her hair to the window, brushed her bangs, and was about to smooth the last strands of hair that flew when she met Louis Fu's gaze from the window. Louis Fu was watching her. Don't you choke me for 2 uncomfortable sentences. Cecile Ruan didn't know if Louis Fu could see her through the window, but she rolled her eyes in her own right, and then slowly turned around, looked at Louis Fu, and winked. I'm sorry, Mr. Fu, I'm a straightforward and quick talker. There is no malice, you won't take it to heart, right? When she finished speaking, Cecile Ruan herself was shocked. She was actually trained by Louis Fu to unknowingly master this prosperous White Lotus skill. Louis Fu didn't answer, his gaze fell on her face, and he looked at her inch by inch. This gaze made Cecile Ruan a little startled. At this moment, she actually felt that maybe this person would put small shoes on her back when she was stingy. In a big way, Louis Fu slapped the contract directly in her face and yelled, "You /refired." This is still the most gratifying result. At a young age, it is not impossible for Louis Fu to do tricks in the dispatch department, her when allocating flights, or say hello to the air traffic control side, and let her plane platoon take off last every time, wasting her hours in vain. At the end of the day, Cecile Ruan felt he couldn't afford to live with money. Thinking of this, Cecile Ruan, who looked at Louis Fu, weakened a little, and there was also the meaning of dodging in his eyes. And this momentary dodge was captured by Louis Fu, who suddenly laughed. Cecile Ruan is sure that what he sees is not a laugh of anger, but a smile that implicitly reveals you are really interesting. Sick. Hello, are you masochistic? Cecile Ruan took a sip of water, not bothering to pay attention to him. It just so happened that the car had already driven to the main road, less than 200 meters away from the gate of the World Airlines. Trouble, stop the car. Cecile Ruan said, I'm down here. The driver did not stop immediately, but just reduced the speed of the car, and Yang, who was holding his breath in the front seat until he was about to lack oxygen, finally found an opportunity to speak. Miss Ruan, this is the big roadside. I know, just under here, there are many people at the front gate, avoid suspicion. The word disgusted bites particularly hard, as if it does not mean disgusting at all, but disgusting. Yang didn't know if he felt wrong, looked back at Louis Fu, he just lowered his head and pulled his sleeves, looked indifferent, and said, no need. No need, what is not necessary? I don't seem to have a relationship with you yet, so there is no need to avoid it, right? Without Louis Fu's approval, the driver naturally wouldn't stop, so he drove all the way into the underground parking lot of World Airlines. At this moment, Cecile Ruan realized that he had thought too much. Louis Fu's parking space is not at all where employees park, so there is really no need to avoid suspicion. After getting out of the car, Cecile Ruan looked down and pulled his clothes twice, and when he looked up, Louis Fu had already walked away. Walking so fast, the legs are borrowed in a hurry to pay back. Louis Fu did not rush to return his leg, reached the 16th floor, and went straight to his office. The administrative secretary and assistant who had been waiting at the door followed, and Louis Fu sat down behind his desk while reports on the month's medium and long-term flight plans and flight tracking and dynamic monitoring were already in front of him. Louis Fu picked up the top document, just glanced at it twice, and his gaze suddenly froze. The assistant in charge of sorting out the report suddenly tensed up and was ready to call the flight director, but saw Louis Fu put down the things in his hand and looked up to ask the administrative secretary, "What about what you prepared last night?" The administrative secretary immediately took out a document that was as thick as a book and put it in front of Louis Fu. "This is all your travel information in the past 2 years, including flight information and hotel stays, as well as specific meeting or event records." Seeing such a thick thing, Louis Fu rubbed his eyebrows, and the administrative secretary said, "It has been marked according to the classification of countries and regions." Louis Fu nodded, "You guys go out first." Cecile Ruan waited for about half an hour at the flight department, and tomorrow's crew would already be there. There are only 2 ACJ-31s assigned to the Jiangcheng base, and the corresponding pilots are naturally limited, including other reserve pilots, more than 10 people, who took the crew car from the special passage to the apron. The moment he got off the car, a strong wind blew over the tarmac unobstructed, and a group of people went against the wind and stood under the wings. The captains took everyone around the plane to check. In fact, there is nothing to check today, the main thing is to admire the beauty of a new aircraft. Then he took people on the plane, entered the cockpit, and familiarized himself with the dashboard and operation panel over and over again. These things were already familiar in Cecile Ruan's heart, but the other captains and co-pilots were all modified and trained, and their hearts were more nervous than newcomers like Cecile Ruan, and everyone went to familiarize themselves with it several times in turn. After doing all this, it was already noon, lunch at the airport, and one after another busy until the afternoon. All the preparatory activities were over, and everyone dispersed in place. It wasn't until he returned to World Aviation that Cecile Ruan came back from his excitement. Although just now she looked at her calm face, self-contained, and steady, she did enough to have the temperament of the best trainee who caused madness, but God knows that she has screamed in her heart. Tomorrow, she will leave her cadet status and officially board the plane for a 3.5-month backrow flying career. Of course, this flight time was reduced by the World Aviation Flight Department based on her qualifications and pilot shortage. In just 3.5 months, she was able to make it to the right side of the cockpit and become a co-pilot. If she does well enough, maybe it will only take 2 years for her to be the captain. Of course, this is also the condition that Sherhang talked to her at the beginning. I don't know if it was too windy today, and the dust on the ground was raised, and Cecile Ruan wanted to cry a little. If she had a friend by her side now, she would definitely hold it and spin 10 times at 360 degrees to vent her feelings. So happy that Yenin sent a WeChat message saying that she also agreed when she had a meal together in the evening. A few seconds later, however, she came back to her. What did the two talk about just now? Yenin asked her what happened to the car last night, and Cecile Ruan said that it was solved smoothly, and thanked Yenin for his help. Yenin said that she was just raising her hand, but by the way asked her if she had time to have a meal together in the evening. This is all a deliberate appointment with her. The moment she figured it out, Cecile Ruan had a hint of regret. She didn't seem to have that meaning at all about Yenin. But after thinking about it, the man is unmarried and the woman is not married, the other party's conditions are good and the personality is compatible, why can't you contact it? So Cecile Ruan obediently went to the gate of the World Airlines and waited for the banquet to pick him up. A few minutes later, Yenin, who came out of the airport Beihang office, swaggered the car in front of the World Airlines gate, and personally came down to open the co-pilot's door for Cecile Ruan and lead her in. Louis Fu and Zhu Dong's car slowly came out of the parking lot, just in time to see this harmonious scene. Isn't that a banquet? Zhu Dong rolled down the window and poked out half of his head. What tornado blew him here today? After a pause, oh, beauty, no wonder. Zhu Dong turned to look at Louis Fu, only to find that his gaze had been on Yenin's car, and Louis Fu did not withdraw his gaze until the car drove away. Although he did not speak, Zhu Dong felt that the atmosphere was not right. Last time they got together in the manor, Zhu Dong still remembered that Yenin said that he was going to chase a female flight of Shiheng, originally thought that he was just joking, but just saw the back of the woman who got into his car, and could speculate that it was the female flyer. Then Louis Fu's mood is quite reasonable. Although there are no explicit rules, what is it about a relationship between you, a pilot of the core route of World Airlines, and the small boss of Beihang Airlines? In other words, Zhu Dong, he was also not happy. But he couldn't judge, after all, he was a traveler, and today he came to talk to Louis Fu about the project, and in a few days he will go to Beihang to talk about cooperation, and both parties are not good to offend, so he naturally avoided the topic. Have you heard that Qin Jiamu is getting married? The invitation must have arrived. Saying that, he snorted twice in his nose. This Qin Gongzi is really a good means, knowing what his old man is forbidden about. He actually forced this one. Louis Fu didn't answer, and Zhu Dong continued to say to himself, I haven't learned since I was a child, and I want to compete with his sister for cakes when I grow up, and I don't see if I have that ability. But I really didn't expect him to do such a trick, to marry the woman whose father was imprisoned and whose mother is still being a mistress to others. If this pushes his old man, who loves face like his life, maybe he will really throw a piece of fat to him to stop. It's just that pity that woman, and now I still think that Qin Jiamu is fighting against the family for her. She also doesn't want to think about what Qin Jiamu is. If Qin Dong bites to death and doesn't let go, Qin Jiamu is not obedient yet. Does he have the capital to tear his face with Qin Dong? If you can think of using women, this means ordinary people can't do. Zhu Dong thinks that his words are beautiful, and this gossip does not mention the desire to arouse Louis Fu's small talk. At least he can follow the means of ridiculing Qin Jiamu, and the matter of banquet just turned over. After several minutes of speaking, Louis Fu still did not answer. Zhu Dong looked sideways. I'm talking to you, what are you thinking? Louis Fu shook his head and pushed down the thought in his mind. I came out with a bottle of mineral water, and when I was about to twist the cap, I remembered something. He leaned back in his seat, pinched his brow bones, and asked, I'm thinking about how many meanings a woman is inexplicably hostile to me. What kind of problem is this? Zhu Dong leaned over and asked, have you offended people? Louis Fu lifted his eyelids. If I offended her, I still don't know why. Oh, Zhu Dong touched his nose. What's the hostility? How hostility? Louis Fu didn't think it was a big deal. After all, the idea of the assassination was his own guess, and Cecile Ruan just choked him in person. It's also lip service. In this way, Zhu Dong probably understood. He almost didn't have to think, and immediately laughed. Some girls may be awkward, and they are not fighting with you with real knives and guns. That is, they fancy you and attract your attention. Louis Fu glanced at him, then lowered his eyes in thought, and after a few seconds, shook his head slightly. She won't be like this. Gate 13. Landing on my heart. Chapter 13. Today's meal ended up being paid by Cecile Ruan, and Yenin thought it was incredible. The first time he encountered this situation, he asked the woman out for dinner, and the other party actually unknowingly paid for it, and he didn't let him find out when he bought it. When did you go to the toilet? When you went out to answer the phone? I don't know. Anyway, Yenin couldn't pull off for a moment, and the woman who came out to eat paid for what happened. But then Cecile Ruan said with a smile, This meal is a thank you for the help of the banquet manager yesterday, and it bothers you so late. Yenin pouted, it's just a show of hands. I know it's trivial to the banquet. Cecile Ruan got up and picked up her bag, her smile did not diminish, but it's a big trouble for me and my friend. If it weren't for you, we would have to contact the property to find the owner at night, it's too troublesome. Cecile Ruan carefully observed Yenin's expression and was relieved to see a relaxed smile in his eyes. She actually knows that men are very mindful of this aspect, but she herself does not like to put herself at a disadvantage because of the substantive relationship of please eat or give gifts when she first met men. It's just that these restaurants chosen by the rich second generation are too expensive, and her flesh really hurts when she pays. Forget it, thinking that this money was taken from Louis Vu's wallet, it suddenly felt a lot better. And Yenin was a little happy by Cecile Ruan's 2 or 3 sentences, left the restaurant, found that it was still early, and the evening breeze was a little comfortable, so he mentioned in passing, do you want to find a place to sit? Cecile Ruan accepted it when she saw it, and did not continue to give Yenin face at this stall, but she said that there was a flight tomorrow, she couldn't drink, and Yenin also said that she would drink some drinks to consume food. Cecile Ruan thought for a while and said, this side is very close to a small bar opened by my friend, if you don't mind the small place there, let's go over there, the environment is very clean. Yenin naturally had no objections, and it took a 5-minute drive to Bianxian's shop. It was not yet 8 o'clock, there were no people in the store, Bianxian was sitting alone at the bar washing cups, and there were only 2 or 3 girls sitting and chatting in the hall. After leading the banquet to sit down, Cecile Ruan went to the bar to say hello to Bianxian. Bianxian leaned against the bar and looked in the direction of Yenin with a smile, boyfriend. It's not, Cecile Ruan took the glass and poured a glass of juice himself, it's just a normal friend, you hurry up and get him a glass of your signature bartender. Bianxian blinked, is it just an ordinary friend? It looks good, tall and handsome, and he looks very rich. Cecile Ruan ignored her and went to chat with Yenin with a tray and a cup. The same feeling as just eating, chatting with Yenin is very comfortable, and naturally does not like to talk about work, everything is pulled from time to time, and Cecile Ruan is made laugh from time to time. The evening was enjoyable, if it hadn't been for that little episode. At that time, Cecile Ruan went to the bar to get wet tissues, and seeing that Bianxian was too busy, he stopped by to help her bring a glass of wine to table 5. The lights in the bar were not very bright, and they looked for one by one next to the table number, and when they were about to bend down to put the wine, the guest stood up sharply and accidentally bumped Cecile Ruan, and the glass of wine was all spilled on Cecile Ruan's clothes. The guest was also embarrassed and quickly took a tissue to help her wipe it. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't notice you. It's okay. The moment they spoke, both of them were stunned for a moment. Cecile Ruan. Jiang Ziyue seemed unsure, and looked at it twice more through the light, it's you. Cecile Ruan looked at her stunnedly and did not speak for a moment. During that time, Cecile Ruan did not know the rumors, but there is no completely impermeable wall, but she just joined Huafei, busy with internal recruitment assessment, and when all the dust settled, look back and think about the source of this matter, besides Jiang Ziyue, who else can it be? But Cecile Ruan didn't go to ask for verification, anyway, he didn't think about being involved with World Airlines again, and then went to the flight academy, so tired that he fell into bed every day, and he didn't have the heart to think about it. Goodbye at this time, Cecile Ruan's heart is very delicate. This moment of silence deepened a small misunderstanding in Jiang Ziyue's heart. Looking at her dress, and then at the surrounding environment, she couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect to meet here by such a coincidence. Jiang Ziyue continued to wipe Cecile Ruan's clothes, and as before, as a senior, helped her straighten her collar. How are you doing? It's fine. Cecile Ruan paused. You have a break today. Well, I'm going to transfer to a domestic flight, this 4-stage flight, relaxed. Saying that, she let out another long sigh. I didn't expect that it would be 3 years in a flash, and not long ago, our old colleagues talked about you. Me, Cecile Ruan smiled, what do I have to talk about? Jiang Ziyue took a tissue again, wiped his hands, and said quite seriously, it's a pity, you are young, beautiful and smart, Wang Lekong also likes you, if you resigned less impulsively, how can you be a purser now? Maybe you can transfer to the management. But seeing that you are also comfortable now, there is nothing bad, compared to the flight attendant industry, it just looks glamorous, but in fact it is still miserable, even I can't stand the days when the days and nights are upside down. I don't know if Jiang Ziyu is weak-hearted, and he can't stop this as soon as he opens his head. But Cecile Ruan is not as idle as her. There is a flight tomorrow morning. Just when Bian Xian called her at the bar, she said that there was something else to do and left first. Jiang Ziyu looked at her back, suddenly remembered something, took out her mobile phone, found the photo that Ni Tong sent her before, compared the back inside, and carefully looked at the figure at the bar. When he decided to go for a drink, Yenin called the driver to wait, so he sat in the back with Cecile Ruan on the way back. As soon as he got into the car, Cecile Ruan received a WeChat message from Jiang Ziyu. I just forgot to say, when will we also find an opportunity to get together? Cecile Ruan doesn't understand how people nowadays like to get together when they have nothing to do, and they don't care about the relationship, not to mention that there are ghosts in their hearts. She thought about it and replied, well, there will be opportunities in the future. As soon as the phone was turned on and closed, Yenin, who was sitting on the side, saw her mobile phone screen. Do you like Japanese male stars? Huh, Cecile Ruan subconsciously asked, you know him too. I can't see that a man like Yen and can actually recognize a Japanese male star at a glance, which is incredible. I know, Yenin raised his hand to the back of his head and twisted his neck. In high school, just what did you spend? Fancy man. Oh yes, the fancy man is on fire, and the girls in the class hang on their lips every day, and I'm tired of hearing it. Bother, you men don't understand. Cecile Ruan turned on the screen and admired her husband's fairy face again. Normal, it is normal for men to be jealous. Over there, Yenin remembered the teenager and said, the most annoying thing is that the girls in the school say every day that Louis Fu's temperament is like who is in it. Cecile Ruan looked up suddenly, who? Yenin picked his temples, what's it called, Xiao Xuanli. Cecile Ruan, little chestnut, him. And it's called augury shen, small chestnut. Yenin choked and grinned, you are really interesting, in fact, I think so, he is much more forced than others. Cecile Ruan looked at Yenin. What do you mean? Who pretended? But Yenin did not receive Cecile Ruan's eyes, and turned to answer the call of an assistant. Until the car was parked downstairs, Cecile Ruan was still unilaterally feasting on the anger of safe high school girls. Where is it like? She thought back to what Louis Fu looked like over and over again, and it didn't look like okay at all. Is the collective blind? After Yenin left, Cecile Ruan stood in the elevator, waiting for the number on the display to decrease to negative and then slowly rise, and the image of Louis Fu still lingered in his mind. With a ding, the elevator door opened. Cecile Ruan looked down at her phone, her front foot had just stepped in, and her back foot was almost dragged in. What a coincidence, I want to get a little chestnut and a small chestnut. Cecile Ruan glanced at him and went straight to the other side. It seems that this was the same last time, the two were obviously in the same elevator, but there was no communication. Cecile Ruan didn't even say hello, and Louis Fu was no better, inevitably taking a look at her the moment the elevator door opened and looked away. But Cecile Ruan actually sneaked a few glances at Louis Fu. Like, it's not like it, the facial features are completely different. But what Yenin said seems to be temperament, not facial features. Cecile Ruan took another sneak glance, as if he was really a little lost. Once a certain setting is accepted. No, stop, he doesn't deserve it. Sometimes people can always keenly perceive a gaze falling on them in a noisy environment, not to mention that they are in a closed elevator. Every few seconds, Louis Fu could feel the gaze of the man next to him quietly pass to his face. He suddenly turned his head sideways and met Cecile Ruan's gaze, carefully pretending to be quiet, but in fact, there is a hint of complicated struggle. Cecile Ruan silently looked away, trimmed her hair pretentiously, and touched her slightly hot cheek. Peeking at the catch, naturally blushed a little, but she pretended that nothing had happened. This time, Louis Fu's gaze fell on Cecile Ruan. But above board, did you drink? From the moment she came in, Louis Fu smelled a smell of alcohol. Nope, then what are you blushing? You're really observant. Cecile Ruan adjusted his expression in a second, and said sadly, does the blush have to be because of drinking? What if I just came back from jumping at the grave and the head hasn't dissipated? Louis Fu was not in the mood to listen to her mouth, and said in a deep voice, you will fly for the first time tomorrow morning, you don't know how serious a problem drinking is. I said I didn't drink it. Cecile Ruan listened to his determined tone, and a nameless fire came out. Is it possible for me to control the spilled alcohol in the bar? Louis Fu didn't have time to ponder the atmosphere of the place. and as soon as the elevator doors opened, Cecile Ruan walked out. Maybe he was angry, or maybe he was a little embarrassed to just peek at someone's catch. Anyway, Cecile Ruan didn't want to spend another second with him. Louis Fu behind her suddenly stopped her. Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan turned around and looked at Louis Fu inexplicably. What for? First, Yenin is a person from Beihang. It is not appropriate for you to be so close. Cecile Ruan raised an eyebrow. So, second, Yenin he loves to play. Changing his girlfriend is more diligent than changing clothes. You think clearly. Hearing this, Cecile Ruan slowly turned around and looked at Louis Fu, as if he was seriously considering what he said. But a few seconds later, she spoke. What about you, President Fu? Love to play. Unexpectedly, she suddenly asked this and changed the topic directly from Yenin to him. Louis Fu's brows furrowed slightly, and his thoughts spread uncontrollably. Don't compare him to me. Cecile Ruan snorted softly and turned away. On this night, the drizzle did not know when it would fall on the city, and before dawn, it quietly stopped, making room for the rising sun. Cecile Ruan slept well and woke up naturally before the alarm went off. Because the first flight was so nervous that she couldn't sleep, this kind of thing did not exist. She could fall asleep quickly as long as she dipped her pillow. But that doesn't mean Cecile Ruan isn't excited. After breakfast, she changed into a sun-dried uniform and carefully tied her hair, meticulously until the hairline was neat. The uniform of the person in the mirror fits almost as if it was tailored, flat and structured, fitting her figure, covering the curvaceous curves, and showing the heroism of her gaze from the inside out. She didn't wear makeup, just a layer of sun protection, and her pores breathed the air smoothly as if they were open, and she had a feeling of renewal. A feeling that had never been felt before spread in the bottom of her heart, sweeping in front of her eyes, and a new picture scroll slowly unfolded in front of her. At this time, there were 2 cars parked downstairs. The morning air was good. Yenin leaned against the car door, straightened his tie, glanced at the car next to him with the driver and Baiyang, and snorted softly. As the minutes passed, Yenin estimated that it was time for Cecile Ruan to go out, so he entered the elevator room of the lobby on the first floor. Sure enough, the floor of the elevator on the right is slowly descending. Yenin wiped a handful of hair against the elevator door, straightened her expression, and prepared to smile at Cecile Ruan. As soon as the elevator door opened, he was greeted with a face that he least wanted to see at this time. Yo, Mr. Fu, it's early. Louis Fu answered, looking up and down at the rare serious dress. What are you doing here? What else can you do? Of course, pick up Cecile Ruan to work. Yenin flicked the neckline. I said that your World Airlines is also too critical, and I don't say that you should allocate some special cars to the pilots. What if you encounter some situation in the taxi? Louis Fu ignored him. He raised his chin with a smile again. Mr. Fu, you said that if I really associate with people from your company, wouldn't this be inappropriate? I see that you have a lot of outstanding talents, or discuss it, transfer it to us Beihang Airlines. The elevator next to it sounded, but it was coincidentally covered by Louis Fu's voice. Is there a brush of the 8 characters? Yenin is usually accustomed to Louis Fu's cold words, and is often stabbed so that he can't speak, but today he has full confidence. I see. Yes, we have a good conversation, it is like seeing each other. Yes, the corners of Louis Fu's lips ticked lightly. How do I think she is more interesting to me? At this time, Cecile Ruan, who was standing in the elevator and heard the full conversation, took a deep breath of cold air expressionlessly and clenched his fists unconsciously. Why, the sky is clear and the rain stops, and you think you can do it again? She stepped out in one step, pedaled to Louis Fu, ignored Yenin who was squeezed aside by her, and spoke. President Fu, are you really a noble who forgets things? Really don't remember me? Gate 14.
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Landing on my heart. Chapter 14. President Fu, just called from the dispatch department and the meteorological department. Some flights on the Arctic Ocean route tomorrow are urgently cancelled due to bad weather, and it is necessary to. Baiyang walked in with his mobile phone. His steps were hurried, until the person stood behind Louis Fu, only to find that the atmosphere was a little strange, and the voice was naturally mute. I need you to confirm your signature. Cecile Ruan, what do you mean? Louis Fu didn't seem to hear Baiyang's words, and looked straight at Cecile Ruan, and the suspicions in his heart for a long time were confirmed. as if the answer was about to come out, waiting for the person in front of him to speak. What do I mean? And what do you mean? What do you mean I'm more interesting to you? Who do you think you are? Cecile Ruan admitted that when he said this tongue twister, his eyes were sharp and cold, and he achieved real disdain with a little disregard, which fundamentally hit Louis Fu's pain point and successfully ignited his anger. Louis Fu's eyes really became cold. Bai Yang touched his neck and felt that the temperature around him instantly dropped by about 10 degrees. Yenin poked his head, accompanied by a question in front of the two. What? It's a shame. Cecile Ruan felt that both she and Louis Fu were embarrassed. Nothing, tilting his head, Cecile Ruan only rolled his eyes halfway and turned to go out first. Gone, banquet. Cecile Ruan, you give me back. The extremely cold but angry voice behind him came faintly, and even Yenin's footsteps stopped. Cecile Ruan, on the other hand, as if he hadn't heard, quickened his pace and walked towards Yenin's car. Yenin's gaze looked between Cecile Ruan's back and Louis Fu's face, pondered for a moment, and chose to follow. Without continuing to ask about the topic just now, without exploring Cecile Ruan's expression, he pulled the car door for her, which was a handy way to handle it. After Cecile Ruan got into the car, he glanced at Louis Fu through the gap through Yenin's body and rolled the remaining half of his eyes. The moment his eyes met, the exploration wanted to make a comeback, and the voice of Bo Yang in his ears suddenly weakened. The complicated past turned over and over in her mind, some subtle memories appeared, but they never revealed their full picture, and finally stopped abruptly as she closed the door hard. The morning breeze passed through the leaves and blew into the hall, smelling fresh after the rain, but Louis Fu felt extremely irritable, loosened his tie and quickened his pace. Bai Yang could feel that Cecile Ruan's attitude was wrong just now without knowing it, and after thinking about it, he whispered, "What's going on with Miss Ruan? Is this the attitude towards the boss?" Louis Fu glanced back at him, his eyes dim, and a little warm smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Very angry, Bai Yang felt that Louis Fu was really angry this time. All in Xinjiang Literature City after all, not everyone can tolerate an unfamiliar woman again and again. In the car, Cecile Ruan sat upright and did not squint, but it did not mean that she did not feel the frequent glance of Yenin. What's wrong? Yenin held his fist against his mouth, unable to hide his smile. Although I don't know what you have with Louis Fu, it's very cool to see him being dumped for the first time. Listening to Yenin's words, there was a faint meaning of inquiring about the inside story, but it was not clearly expressed, giving Cecile Ruan a choice. She naturally threw the question back. Do you have anything to do with him? This man is really making enemies everywhere. Yenin coughed and said vaguely, competitors, this is not. Cecile Ruan does not believe this. The two airlines were originally separated, and now they also adhere to the non-zero-sum game model, competing and cooperating with each other to achieve a win-win situation. Who doesn't know that the chairman of World Airlines and the chairman of Beihang still get together from time to play golf and make a cup of tea? And even the second generation of Louis Fu and Yenin can be regarded as growing up together. But Cecile Ruan didn't believe it, and Yenin was embarrassed to tell the truth. When he was a child, he and Louis Fu couldn't get along. He always aspired to be a rich second generation who could be written into the negative textbooks of ideological and moral textbooks, and he didn't dare to do anything too out of line because of his family's discipline, so that he always felt that he was simply not worthy of the word Qiao given to him by his teacher. But Louis Fu's wave of people has been incompatible with the painting style of their group since childhood, and they are clearly distinguished. But you say that he has many rules is not, and he has not done less things that violate the rules of middle school students. I don't know if the face is too deceitful or the final report card is too beautiful. The teacher has always held him in the nest of his heart, even he drove a sports car in his school uniform during the winter vacation of his third year of high school, and the car was photographed to the school, and the result was suppressed by the teacher before the parents came forward. Of course, in the eyes of Yenin, this is not a big deal. He has always been worried that the goddess he has been secretly in love with for 2 years has not dared to make a move, actually took the initiative to know him, became a friend for a month, and specially invited him on his birthday, fascinated him, and as a result, people finally said, "Can you call Louis Fu, by the way?" It's a shame to say this, but Yenin really remembered hating Louis Fu for almost 10 years. But today, he turned over at a banquet, and Cecile Ruan really gave him enough face. Thinking of this, Yenin felt that his liking for Cecile Ruan was a little more, glanced at the uniform on her body a few times, and sighed, alas, not to mention Louis Fu, I still regret that you did not come to Beihang now, but I am generous, and I definitely hope that you have a bright future everywhere. Cecile Ruan touched his epaulets, smiled. Thank you. Think what? You will go to the airport in a while and there will be a surprise. What? You'll know in a moment. The atmosphere in the car was harmonious, and there were also people in the World Airlines cabin crew at this time. Jiang Ziyue pulled the flight box and hurried towards the conference room. Black leather shoes were soft and flat, and there was no loud sound on the clean ground, but it did not affect her momentum in the slightest. She quickened her pace, and the smile on her lips became more and more obvious. Ni Tong met her halfway and walked over to say hello with a smile. Master. Morning, today is beautiful. Jiang Ziyue stopped, folded his hands on the flight case lever, and stood with his feet naturally in a T shape. You're quite idle, you haven't boarded yet. The collaboration meeting hasn't started yet. Ni Tong raised his eyebrows. You are in too good shape today. The reporter's camera will all shoot at you in a while. Remember to show the left side of the face, there are dimples over there, it looks better. Jiang Ziyue accepted this flattery, said to talk back, and pulled the flight box into the elevator with a big stride. There are already 5 flight attendants sitting in the conference room, each of them is cleverly selected, with dignified facial features and tall figures, and getting together to chat also gives people a pleasing feeling. Someone saw Jiang Ziyue coming and greeted her, but there was not much warmth. After all, there are so many employees in the cabin crew, and Jiang Ziyue has just transferred from an international route to a domestic route, and most of the flight attendants here are not familiar to her. And the topic that these flight attendants just talked about was related to her. Not a bad word, but not a good thing, so she naturally shut up. Originally, today's purser was not Jiang Ziyue, but an experienced old purser on domestic routes. Jiang Ziyue herself made a mistake in this matter, and what she saw in Wang Lekong was only a corner of the shortlist, but she mistakenly thought that it had been finalized. Happy came back from Spain, checked the background, did not see the task of ACJ-31's first flight, and went to the side to listen, only to know that it was not her who he chose in the end. Although it was an empty joy caused by her own misunderstanding, she had already told people close to her about it, and now she slapped herself, feeling aggrieved, and last night she pulled a few little sisters out to complain. Who knew that when she returned home, she received a call from Wang Lekong, saying that the scheduled purser had committed acute appendicitis and asked her to go up. At that moment, Jiang Ziyue had a feeling that he should never be able to run away, and even had the illusion that he had been snatched up and recovered, and immediately got up from the bed and put on a mask. This was also the conversation in the conference room just now, and they all said that Jiang Ziyue's luck was too good. They are flight attendants, it looks like a decent profession, but inside, outsiders can know how much high-altitude radiation, noise impact, none of them are light. There are also limits to career upside, and sometimes there is no long-term plan in sight. And as long as it is a service industry, it is usually indispensable to be angry, and how many people have been worn out of temper and cannot have the slightest impatience with passengers. Therefore, a mission like the first flight of a new model has media coverage and commemorative significance, and the camera is focused to take a few photos and make a news, which is regarded as one of the few highlights of his career. All in Xinjiang Literature City, suddenly picked up by someone, others can't say sour, but also secretly sorry for the old purser before. Jiang Ziyue actually felt everyone's emotions a little, and did not care, sat down generously, and said, Captain, have they been here? One of them said, it's not here yet, it should be soon. Jiang Ziyue nodded and took out the passenger list. This flight mission is not ordinary, the cabin is not all open to the public, a large number of passengers are invited to experience, in addition to some traditional media people. There are also some online self-media operators, in addition, Louis Fu is also among them. According to the cabin crew, he did not deliberately take this flight, but he just happened to go to Linqing today on a business trip, and the time coincided. Jiang Ziyue confirmed the passenger list again, and turned over the crew list and crew list. Yesterday, the call was urgent, she was busy applying a mask, only carefully looked at the name of the passenger, the crew list and crew list had not yet had time to read. His gaze just touched the information bar, and there was already a discussion in his ears continuing, that woman flew on our flight. Didn't you say to arrange for her to go with the foreign captain? You just found out. I found out last night, and I heard about it before the list came out. Jiang Ziyue's eyes were slight, and he looked down, but he saw that there were 2 names in the crew list, Fan Mingji and Yu Yangshua. both of which were obvious male names. What female fly? You didn't download it. A flight attendant said, the updated follower list this morning, the new female flight is on our flight. While the other party pushed the list over, the discussion in his ears continued. This name is a little familiar. I haven't heard of it. How do I feel like I've heard about it? The sound faded with the footsteps outside, the door of the conference room was pushed open, and 3 people dressed in white and black epaulets appeared. A thick male voice sounded, everyone has arrived. Jiang Ziyue looked over, and beside the 2 men, he saw the person he had only seen last night. The conference room fell silent for a moment. The silence of the other flight attendants was because they saw a beautiful female flight, which was amazing, but also the envy and adoration of some little girls. The silence of the other person is due to a huge self-struggle. She was obviously in the bar last night. How could it be? In a moment, Jiang Ziyue saw Cecile Ruan's gaze meet her. At that moment, Jiang Ziyue felt as if she knew everything. Jiang Ziyue's face turned red in an instant, the heat went straight to the brain, the hand on the table curled up secretly, the nails pinched the palm of the hand lightly and heavily, and the slight pain was just enough to suppress the buzz in the brain. He never thought that Cecile Ruan would still appear in the world, so much so that the moment he saw her, he nailed himself to the cutting board, as if Cecile Ruan would come back and question her at any time. Everyone got up to say hello, and Captain Fan waved his hand. Everyone doesn't have to be so polite, sit down. Only then did Jiang Ziyue come to his senses and wanted to stand up, but saw that everyone had already sat down. She saw Cecile Ruan seated, with a grin on her lips, and nodded at her, as if to say long time no see. I haven't seen anything for a long time. Jiang Ziyue remembered last night's WeChat message, and felt that Cecile Ruan's phrase, there will be opportunities in the future, seemed meaningless. Thinking of this, Jiang Ziyue couldn't raise his head and look at Cecile Ruan at all. In fact, Cecile Ruan really didn't mean anything else, she just thought it was strange to rush into the old days on this occasion. Fan Mingji flipped through the route map twice, got up and said, let's introduce yourself, I am Fan Mingji, the captain of this flight. Yu Yangshua on the side continued, I am Yu Yangshua, the co-pilot of this flight. At the moment when his words fell, the 5 flight attendants on the opposite side glued their eyes to Cecile Ruan. She stood up and cleared her throat, I'm Cecile Ruan, the trainee co-pilot of this flight. After speaking, she glanced at the 5 flight attendants on the opposite side. Is there something on my face? The one sitting at the front pursed his lips and smiled. No, look at you beautiful. One sentence brought the atmosphere of the entire conference room to relax, and only Jiang Ziyue seemed to be wandering outside. Cecile Ruan glanced over a few times, and every time she met her gaze, she didn't naturally start away. What else is there to say? This expression confirms Cecile Ruan's conjecture. It's really boring. Cecile Ruan leaned back in her seat when the captain suddenly called her. Do you have any questions? Cecile Ruan immediately sat up straight. I didn't. Well, I'll just say a final word about the precautions. The captain took the list and said word by word. First, there is a media report today, and the guest is 20 minutes in advance. Second, there may be bumps in 1 hour and 5 minutes after takeoff. Do a good job of reminding you. In addition, if there is an emergency such as a fire, it is necessary to report the cockpit in time. After speaking, he looked at Jiang Ziyue, and the other party did not react. Cecile Ruan tapped the table with a pen, purser. Jiang Ziyue returned to his senses, opened his mouth, and faced the look that Cecile Ruan handed over, and did not speak for a while. What's wrong? The captain asked, is there a problem? No. Jiang Ziyue immediately stood up, inhaled and tightened his abdomen, and said, I will say 2 points. 1 is cold and hot water 3 to 7, pay attention to the temperature, and prevent passengers from burning. In addition, passengers need to be monitored more when they change seats at will to avoid the imbalance of aircraft loading. Well, what about you? The captain turned to Cecile Ruan and Yu Yangshua. Yu Yangshua shook his head. Cecile Ruan turned his pen, tilted his head and said, let me add a little digression. Everyone in the conference room looked at her, especially the flight attendants, smiling like flowers. Today's situation is special. There are media reports, everyone pay attention to the words. Cecile Ruan looked over at Jiang Ziyue. If you don't know what to say, just keep silent, understand? Jiang Ziyue looked at Cecile Ruan like that, her palms were hot, but she still showed a professional smile. All in Xinjiang Literature City, okay, got it. Okay. The captain got up and said, let's go. Everyone got up neatly. Cecile Ruan followed behind the captain. Several flight attendants came over to talk to her. Cecile Ruan answered, and turned around to see Jiang Ziyu walking at the back. Cecile Ruan dropped a step and tilted his head to look at her. Sister Jiang. Jiang Ziyu stopped in response and kept a distance of 2 meters from Cecile Ruan. How? Cecile Ruan was about to open her mouth to say something, when a small cry sounded ahead, and she also looked up, and a man in a suit strode towards him holding a large bouquet of fiery red roses. The red color is bright. There are hundreds of flowers, blocking half of the body of the man holding it, which naturally attracts the attention of this group of people. The man walked straight to Cecile Ruan under his gaze. Miss Ruan, your flower. Rushing to receive such a bouquet of flowers, Cecile Ruan reacted for a while before remembering the surprise he said in the car today. That's a pleasant surprise. Cecile Ruan smiled stiffly, took the flower, and found the card inside. Sure enough, it was Yenin, wishing her a smooth first flight. Thank you. The man was the front desk receptionist of the World Airlines, delivered the flowers and left. Cecile Ruan held such a bouquet of flowers, and in the envious eyes of everyone, some did not know what to do. She can't always take flowers on the plane. While looking around for a place to handle the bouquet, the door of the international conference room of the flight department opposite opened from the inside. 2 women in professional clothes pushed the door and stood outside. Louis Fu drove out, followed by Bai Yan and a dozen attendees. The group looked solemn, and 2 or 3 middle-level managers did not have good faces, and they felt that they were scolded at the meeting when they looked at it from a distance. The serious aura infected Cecile Ruan, and the flight attendants behind him were silenced. When Louis Fu's gaze swept over, they pulled the flight box and made a silent detour, for fear that they would accidentally be burned by the flames. Cecile Ruan was covered by the flowers and looked straight at Louis Fu with a pair of exposed eyes. The surroundings were as silent as if the mute button had been pressed. So Louis Fu's footsteps were inexplicably amplified, and he walked towards Cecile Ruan step by step, standing in front of her, his eyes drooping, sweeping over the bouquet of roses, and the corners of his mouth held a shallow curve. The curvature made Cecile Ruan particularly dazzling. What happened to me collecting a bouquet of flowers? Cecile Ruan, everywhere I go, people love flowers, flowers bloom, the president sees the president, and I want you to laugh here with yin and yang. I haven't settled the score with you about what you said in the morning, but you dumped me with a sneer. Something? Cecile Ruan asked. Louis Fu seemed to think that the bouquet of flowers was an eyesore, and reached out and pushed it, revealing Cecile Ruan's entire face. You'd better explain to me what you said in the morning mean when you get back. Cecile Ruan looked into his eyes and seemed to see it. If you can't say why, you're done. So big boss, do you want me to review it for you? Cecile Ruan also tugged at the corners of his mouth. Who knows when to return, the weather is not certain. Louis Fu, accustomed to calling the shots rather than negotiating, apparently didn't have as much time to talk, and had a large list of MEL/CDL items waiting for him before he boarded the plane. I can wait for you. After speaking, he turned around but heard a sentence from behind. Then you may have to borrow another 500 years from heaven. The air in the aisle seemed to be emptied instantly, and even Jiang Ziyu, who had been silently listening to the conversation with his ears up, quietly retreated to the corner. This time, Louis Fu looked back at Cecile Ruan, his eyes narrowed. What else is there to guess? Cecile Ruan is just hostile, or deeply malicious, towards him. He pressed the tip of his tongue against his chin, nodded with a smile, and walked forward. This expression made by Yang on the side read a sense of this time you are still allowed to be wild. I will take so many shares of this company, for nothing. Silently lighting a wax for Cecile Ruan in his heart, Bai Yang followed Louis Fu and whispered, I have just asked the personnel department to adjust Cecile Ruan's resume, but her qualifications only fill in Huafei's professional experience. I have already contacted Huafei, because it is considered a privacy. I need to go around and send her resume in half an hour. The people next to him didn't even sneer. Bai Yang had already dug a grave for Cecile Ruan. This is also too strong, let alone Louis Fu. Even if he is changed, he has to put someone like Cecile Ruan who challenges his temper again and again on the death list. He looked up at Louis Fu's side face, which was even more gloomy than when he had just started the meeting. He had been here for more than a year and had never seen Louis Fu so angry. Half an hour later, the ministry meeting was over, and a dedicated crew car was waiting downstairs to transport Louis Fu and Bai Yan and 2 assistants to the terminal. In the car, Bai Yang handed over the resume he had just received. He took a look at it first, and when he turned to the second page, his heart clicked, full of puzzlement. But this was not his problem, pondered, and said, Mr. Fu, Cecile Ruan, she. Without waiting for Bai Yan to finish, Louis Fu took the resume, opened the first page impatiently, and looked at it hastily. His expression did not change much. Until I saw the second page, past professional experience, my eyes froze. The car stopped immediately, and Bai Yang said again, President Fu, board the plane first. Louis Fu's gaze slowly moved away from the crew department 4 of Hengshi Aviation Jiangqing headquarters and looked up towards the covered bridge. Behind the transparent plastic steel wall, the figure of 3 uniforms looming in the cabin. 3 years ago, Louis Fu walked toward the covered bridge and instructed Bo Yan to call his former secretary in North Africa. Some of the signs were already slowly emerging in his mind, but it seemed too dramatic for Louis Fu to be sure. When the phone was answered in North Africa, Louis Fu had already walked into the covered bridge. Less than 20 meters away, Cecile Ruan stood next to the captain, his posture straight, smiling, and his eyes slowly moved to him. Louis Fu's voice sounded in his ears. Cecile Ruan. I remember her, and I was very impressed with her. When I went to London to buy W.T. Airport 3 years ago, she appeared several times. A few times coffee was delivered, do you remember? Louis Fu raised his eyes suddenly. His steps did not stop, but his gaze was a little abrupt. The voice in the air continues. Later, she also showed up at Alvin's private yacht party. Didn't you give her a key card at that time? She quit after that day. I mentioned it to you. As for the rest, the only thing I remember is that before I moved to North Africa, I sorted out your work mailbox and found that Cecile Ruan had sent you more than a dozen emails during that time, all about the flying plan. I saw that she was sincere, so I transferred her information by the way, and she had passed the assessment of the Feyang plan that year and was the best candidate at that time. While the former secretary explained, Louis Fu had gradually come to a distance of less than 2 meters from the cabin. It wasn't a big deal, and I didn't mention it later, but I felt at that time that maybe it wasn't just you, Mr. Fu, but even I misunderstood the girl. Maybe she didn't mean anything else, she just wanted to be a pilot. As the words fell, Louis Fu was already standing in front of Cecile Ruan. There was less than half a step between the two. Louis Fu seemed to have a wind blowing in his ears, sweeping away the captain's greeting, leaving only one person in front of him. She stands tall, her uniform is meticulous, and the 2 epaulets on her shoulders that highlight her identity stand out. She hooked the corner of her lips and said with a smile, Mr. Fu, welcome to boarding. Cecile Ruan, the trainee co-pilot of this flight, is dedicated to serving you. For a long time a strange atmosphere floated in the air. Cecile Ruan looked up and saw Louis Fu open his mouth. Oh, gate 15. For a long time a strange atmosphere floated in the air. Cecile Ruan looked up and saw Louis Fu open his mouth. Oh, gate 15.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.